Hello, and welcome to episode 138 of the Book Binge, where this week we're doing a review of another arc that I received, but this one was back in September of 2023 when I first received it. It did take me a long time to finish the book, and has taken me a little bit of time to, be able to review it as well, so my apologies to Abby for that, but thank you to Abby for providing that arc for me. Either way, this review is 100% my thoughts alone. No sway here, just as always, I'm not going to, change the way that I review a book just because of receiving it as an arc or being friends with the person or whatever the case may be. But with that being said, I did start this book when I first received the arc back in September. I think I tried to continue it a little bit in October. I don't remember if I had time to do that, but I did plow through and finish it at the very end of November because of the audiobook here, very beginning of December basically, in that sort of space of time. Because of a really, really cheap Cyber Monday sale for the audiobook, I was just like, you know what? I don't know when I'll be able to get around to finishing this book otherwise, so let's just grab this audiobook and finish it this way. So that is what I did. I thought there was plenty to like in this one. It's a little bit of a hard book or series concept to describe, but I'll try my best to talk about some things as we go. But basically, the conceit of the story is as if Earth is kind of like one planet in solar system or in a galaxy that is where humanity isn't the highest race of being. Essentially, the conceit is that there are superhumans on the planet, but these superhumans are actually children of this higher being, this higher race that happen to live on Earth. And the story follows one of these characters primarily, and also their relationships, and gets into some of the high sci-fi concepts a little bit earlier than I would have otherwise expected. But let's go ahead and jump into the good of Majority by Abby Goldsmith, with the fact that I thought that the story itself starts off really intriguing. I thought the prologue was actually very, very good, made me want to continue reading immediately, and I thought part one was quite good as well. I loved the general ideas, whether they be the cosmic ideas or the character ideas. The different thematic exploration of all this was cool. I just thought that Abby handled a lot of the introduction to the book quite well. A lot of the thematic exploration, like I did say, is really cool, if a little bit varied at times. There's lots of different thematic ideas being explored here, and is primarily the reason that I found myself so interested in the book even towards the end, where the story itself wasn't really clicking with me the best. Most of these themes are related to things like oppression and slavery, godhood, justice, other similar material. A lot of these themes are actually quite opposite of each other, all things considered. You have, each major theme that you have that you're exploring, you have its opposite counterpart that it's exploring as well. And I thought that, for exploring so much in one single book, that Abby did quite a good job to do all of that. Like I said, I thought it was all the most thought-provoking material, and thought-provoking enough to be commendable without necessarily being inherently cheesy or well played out. There are plenty of these themes that a lot of people might roll their eyes at because of the way that they're explored so often, especially in literature nowadays, and not often in the best ways. I thought that they were handled surprisingly well for, I think, a debut book. This is at least the debut published book by Abby, but she did write this whole series on Wattpad or whatever it was before actually getting them, I'm presuming, revised and getting a publisher to publish them. And I thought that this first book did explore a lot of the material she was trying to explore pretty decently. And in the defense of some of these themes as well, if some people might be rolling their eyes and being like, oh, well, that's been explored a lot of the reason that some of this also works is because of the setting, the general sci-fi decisions that Abby made, which a lot of these decisions are quite bold, in my opinion. So, that really did a lot. But I think, in general, my favorite part of this book, really, quite frankly, the stuff that I'm going to remember the most moving forward is going to be all of part one, especially with the prologue. The prologue was super evocative with the primary main character, and part one, moving into a different character's POV, really gives you a super great person to follow in just the way that the story unfolds and the way that the ideas for this character, the superhuman, are unfolded. It's just really great. But for the bad of Majority, I do think, because I've, mentioned the first part of this, I think this book is made up of 8 parts, I believe. The first couple parts are very good, but I do think that certain things escalate a bit too quickly depending on where the story's at and what it's doing. So certain aspects to the pacing, I think, are just a little bit too quick, a little bit too off. This part one felt dense enough with certain material that it felt like the series, that Torth as a series, is meant to be like a duology, maybe a trilogy at most. But apparently this is meant to be 6 books, which seems really weird to me, having come off the end of this first one. Like I said, the pacing in certain areas is a little bit off, especially in the back half. It's a bit messy, though the first half is actually very good in this regard. But the back half simultaneously moves too quickly through certain material, with certain things that feel almost a little bit undeserved, where the plot is pushed forward while also being a tiny bit boring in comparison to some of the stuff that came before. Even though it like shouldn't, based off of some of the stuff that's happening. So it's just kind of a weird dichotomy that the back half just feels a little bit messy in this regard. But on this topic of pacing, I would also have preferred if this pacing escalation made this into a 2-part book in some ways, which is ironic. Like I said, part 1 I think could have been a little bit longer, taken a little bit more time to go through the escalation of events that it did, and part 2 maybe should have been a little bit shorter as a climax, pace things a little bit better. But generally speaking, I think that the book was good for what it was. As for the ugly, on the topic of escalation mentioned before, some of the reasons that I found part 1 to be so good was because part 1 reminds me most of something like Lorien Legacies, the way that the sort of concept of the series is handled, basically. I Am Number 4, that series, is a series that I love, the way that an alien species that are very similar to humans exist on planet Earth, and the sort of material that can be explored in that concept with that character is something that I really loved about that series, and that I thought was going to be a main thing of this series. Maybe not, because this book does go into the high sci-fi stuff and gets into the crazy settings and stuff really early. I think like halfway through part 2, some of that stuff starts to get pretty crazy already, even though it feels like this first book should have been mostly set on Earth, whereas the majority of it actually wasn't set on Earth, which is a really weird and bold decision, actually. I respect it, but it does have me, like I said, a bit confused how this series is going to be 6 books rather than just 2 or 3. So, that's kind of an interesting thing to note. As for the recommendation, I don't not recommend Majority. It's definitely a book where if you're curious about some of the themes and ideas, I'd say give it a shot, because the setting does definitely make those themes, those ideas really great to explore. I believe I said in my written review for this book once I finished it that I would give it a 4-star if I enjoyed the story a little bit more. In fact, I might have actually given the book 4 stars, I don't remember. Actually, no, I think I gave it 3 stars, because I think more people are going to read this book for the story and for the plot, for the sci-fi stuff, and that stuff I don't think is the strongest of the book. That was more in that 3.5 star range, whereas the themes in context with the characters and the setting are a little bit more in that 3.4 or 3.5 to 4 star range. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied reviewing several books in a row right now, but generally speaking, it's a book that like I said, I recommend if you're curious about the themes and the context of the setting, and it was decent overall fun. I really enjoyed it. Maybe not a gigantic hit for me yet, but I do intend to continue the series at some point. It's not a high priority, but I have actually purchased the second book for the audiobook, which is actually quite a bit shorter. I think how long is this audiobook? This one's audiobook is 23.5 hours. The second audiobook is only like 14 or 14.5 hours, so it's a decent bit shorter. So I will get to that one at some point, not sure when, but I do plan to continue the series, if that tells you that I enjoyed this book enough for what it was. And I am really curious to see how it continues in light of some of the things that I did enjoy, and see what decisions Abby makes going forward. Maybe I'll be able to fully recommend this book and this series a little bit later as I continue. As of right now, I think it's one that you should maybe keep your eye on, and if you're interested in sort of the concept of it, then maybe give it a shot. But for now, I'm not going to say it's a must-read for the moment. It's basically how I feel, just kind of right there in the middle at the moment. But thank you for watching this review. Thanks to Abby, like I said, again, for offering the arc in the first place, as being the first person to offer me an arc that wasn't somebody who I knew in some capacity. So that was a rather enlightening experience to be able to review a book from someone that I had no idea existed as an author, in a book that I had no clue about until it was offered to me. So it was a fun experience. But thank you guys again for watching this video. I'll be back on Thursday with a precursor to my next train of Wheel of Time diaries. So if you've been following along with me on that journey, I hope you will stick around for that video. I'll see you guys there.